So the first question received was how the diaphragm asymmetry be improved by craniosacral therapy. Okay, so remember, we are not going to treat the diaphragm by treating the craniosacral therapy. You should see the asymmetry in the cranial bone motion. Okay, it's always the impairment specific or dysfunction specific. Okay, so if the impairment or alteration the symmetry in the cranial bones correlate with the diaphragm asymmetry, then we can think that it is related to that, and you can mobilize those skull bones or mobilize the sacrum, for example. Instead of sacrum flexing, it is going into unilateral flexion. Okay, one side. So that means it could be indicating that the affected side. Okay, but there is no hard and fast rules, as I was telling you about the evidence. Okay, so don't think too much about this. Okay, use your brains for any other useful things. Okay, first of all, try to identify the core concept and try to see that whether you can improvise by scientific background. Okay, so that is important. Don't go too much into that, because nobody has told that if right side hemidiaphragm is elevated means what will be the deviation in the cranial bones. Okay, or what will be the deviation in the sacrum. Okay, the primary information what is existent itself is pseudoscience. Okay, so where are we actually going further into that and inside, and you're trying to relate that. Okay, so better beware about that. And whenever there's a hemidiaphragm impaired excursion, okay, it could be a habitual scoliosis, okay, just a postural one, or it could be a sometimes even our food habits, because if we always have the habit of filling the stomach. For Indians, stomach is still here. Okay, they don't eat till here, they eat till here. Okay, so what happens? The space. Okay, so that space, when it is more, intestinal motility always has its own rate and rhythm. You can't force the food to be digested fast and it will go excreted everything. Okay, so you cannot do that. It will challenge the bacteria that is there in the gut also. Okay, this overeating itself actually will create a visceral shift. Okay, that's what is called as the visceral manipulation. It's also one of the topics which addresses about the fascia, visceral fascia, their restrictions, peritoneal fluid, adhesions, ligaments around the visceral structures, okay, and how they can become tight or they can go for a strain. Okay, so if there are ligaments that are suspending the heart also, okay, pericardium, there are ligaments that are suspending the lungs. So, but these ligaments are not bone to bone, they are all fascia to fascia. Okay, so those all could be influenced. So diaphragm can be indirectly influenced by the any kind of a food habit, which is overeating, for example, for the stomach, or it is a habitual postural one, or it is just to do with a preferential right side lying more than left side lying. Okay, in sleep, we always know that anatomically right side lung is beneficial. Okay, so it gets the air maximum. Left one never gets that much. Okay, if you see the proportion, 70% of the gases exchange happens from the right, not from the left. Left lung is kept just for accommodating the space for the heart. Okay, because heart is there, left lung is very small. Okay, right diaphragm being high, it's because of the liver. Okay, so if there are any hepatic disorders also, will create a diaphragm to shift. And also same way, I am talking all this in absence of pulmonary conditions. Okay, in the absence of any surgery, there is no other. Okay, so the same way, multiple factors interact to produce that. Okay, so that's why we need to evaluate whether that cause is actually related to the somatic dysfunction. The somatic dysfunction could be tenderness in the, for example, in the diaphragm. If there is a trigger point in the diaphragm, Okay, and because of that, if diaphragm is flat one side, okay, that means it is tight diaphragm. When it is tight, the diaphragm is flat. When it is lengthened, okay, when it is inhibited, that time it is going into ascent. Okay, so you want to, the lengthened diaphragm also can go for a trigger point. A shortened diaphragm also can go for a trigger point, because same as the skeletal muscles, a tight muscle also goes for trigger point. Patient comes to the trigger point and you see that shoulder is keeping it elevated. So that means it is because of shortening and then trigger point. Tight muscles, because active insufficiency. Muscle is not able to contract effectively because it's already shortened. Other one is girls who have droopy shoulders, okay, lengthened upper trapezius, they also have trigger points, because to prevent the micro trauma and injury. Okay, so both the ways it will develop trigger points. So when you are releasing the trigger point, then further you have to take care. Tightness is there, give the muscle energy technique to the diaphragm. Okay, treat the diaphragm directly. Okay, try to see the structures that is nearby the diaphragm. Okay, above and below, what are their influences? Okay, whether patient was having a chronic pleural effusion, okay, or any abdominal any procedures done. Okay, so everything comes into the picture there. Other than relating craniosacral therapy to the diaphragm. Okay, of course, craniosacral rhythm, primary respiratory mechanism, all that is there, but you cannot think only head to the toe, the sacrum to cranium only. The relationship, there is no evidence. So better see for regional dysfunctions. Okay, in my opinion, you train retraining of the diaphragm after a visceral manipulation might help. Okay, if there is abdominal structures that are at fault. Okay, if diaphragm is at fault, you give the myofascial release or the muscle energy technique, and then do the breathing retraining. It's fine. If you see postural abnormalities, then you will go for spine or imbalance in the quadratus lumborum, because scoliosis is there. So depends on the impairments. Okay, everywhere. And even an habitual habit of just standing on one leg, for example, weight bearing. Left leg, we are always putting the weight. Okay, we stand. Most of the 80% of individuals, right hand dominant individuals, right leg is the dominant one. Okay, so they'll weight bear on left leg. So that also will create that left side abdomen to be short. Okay, when abdomen is short and left lung, already it is at mechanical disadvantage. Okay, left side of the lung, diaphragm excursion left side, always it is a problem. Okay, unless you are really good in respiratory function, the left excursion will not be that much compared to the right. Okay, this is a normal, like how side to side difference we have right and left in upper limb or lower limb. Same way diaphragm also, right and left difference is there. You need not think that left is not elevating, left is not depressing. Okay, it is abnormal, left is abnormal. Okay, so that might be adaptation of the individual also. So you cannot tell whether it is really necessary to actually train that. Okay, sometimes. But if it is the right side, definitely it is pathological. Okay, the higher focus to treat hemidiaphragm being abnormal. If it is in the right, definitely you have to concentrate more and immediately address that fact. Okay, so that focus goes. One more factor is, whenever any kind of a dysfunction that is present, you should know which one is causing what. Okay, whether diaphragm asymmetry has caused the visceral adhesions, or because of visceral adhesions, the diaphragm asymmetry has come. Okay, so this is something which is a dilemma like chicken and egg. Okay, which came first. But ultimately, if a patient is telling breathing complaints first, after that abdominal pain or indigestion, all these things, okay, you can suspect that it is diaphragm primary, visceral is secondary. Okay, same way like myofascial or neural or articular, which we took in AM and MT also. Articular problem or myofascial, which one is first? How will you know? It is by the symptom progression. Okay, you know that myofascial is the cause for the numbness. Piriformis is tight, so sciatic nerve is getting symptoms. So you have to treat the muscle. But if you know that sciatic nerve was tight, After that pyriform is got tight means you have to mobilize the nerve first. Okay. How do you know that? That is AM and MT webinar we covered in depth. Okay. That's why you should evaluate for the presentation. It's not like Ram and Sham both are there for whom I have to give laddu. Okay. You have to think of whether you have to respect the senior or you want to pamper the junior, which is your priority. Okay. If you want to respect the senior, find out who is elder and give the laddu to them. If you want to pamper the junior, find out who is younger and give the laddu to them. If they are twins, even then you will ask who was born first. Both the babies cannot come out together. Okay. Even in cesarean. Okay. So there is always a lapse. We know that babies, how they are born. Today also we are going to see a concept which is about the developmental milestones achieved by babies. So very sensitive, be there. And in fact, in all of that, you are not able to find finally like nothing is happening, hypothetical means. You should come to a stage where, yes, for me, both are important because Ram or Sham, both are my family. Okay. Same way, patient is important. So you have to treat both. Either way. That is what the routine average therapist they do. When you can't find out what is causing what, you treat both. Okay. You know that treating one, it will relieve the other only if it is the source. If diaphragm problem is crossing abdomen, you release the diaphragm, abdominal problem will go in addition to the breathing problem. Okay. Because diaphragm was primary. If neural problem is primary, you treat the nerve, muscle problem will also reduce. So treatment itself will show that direction of what could be the important one. You might give both the treatments, but the patient will tell one treatment I am feeling better more than the other. Okay. You have to trust the patient. You can't tell that it is because of placebo. Let it be because of placebo. Okay. We are also having brains. We also have placebo. Okay. There's nothing wrong in having a placebo. Okay. Nocebo only is forbidden because it is negative effect. Okay. People will feel that I will worsen. Okay. Like for example, Dr. Pankaj feeling nocebo for English. Okay. So what will happen? जब भी मैं इंग्लिश में बात करता हूँ शट डाउन हो जाएगा करो. Okay. So PowerPoints, with the PowerPoints when we talk English, it's okay because spellings it is there, we can read that. Okay. But talking and listening English, that is nocebo. Let it be there. It is not affecting anything. Okay. But rather than listening like this, okay, when I talk in Hindi, he'll listen like this. When I'm talking in English, he'll be like, finish. Okay. Let it be. That is the patient response. Everybody has that difference. Okay. So there's nothing abnormal in that. So you should utilize the psychological effect to our, not more than to our advantage. It is for the improvement of the patient we are utilizing that. Okay. If a patient feels that an expensive machine, okay, will improve their symptoms, there's nothing wrong in using that. Okay. Don't be like, you are thinking that that machine, because it is big, you are telling that it is effective. No, no, no. My hand only, I will create the effect. Some patients have the placebo with machines. Other people who are very, what is called as emotionally sensitive, they have placebo with touch. Okay, human touch. So the moment we do any hands-on therapy, they'll feel better. But you keep the machine for them, they'll not improve because they have nocebo. So sometimes you have to match. That's why even the evidence-based practice itself has told that it is your expertise. You should be trained. Patient, what is that finding? What is the examination? What is the impairment? That is clinical reasoning. Okay. Your expertise. Okay. These two are one side. Other side is research evidence. Okay. What other people have found previously. If there is nothing is there, evidence means you work to create the evidence. Don't try to work on the patients. Okay. So try to establish the evidence. That is important. So evidence is one side. Your expertise is another side. Okay. And then next comes here patient preferences. Okay, what the patient wants and expects. That is very, very integral part of evidence-based practice. So remember, do not ignore that. Don't try to change that in the patient. Okay, try to go in that direction and try to bring about a lifestyle modification. That's why this there is a procedures called as motivational interviewing. There are procedures called as rational emotive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay, these are all very useful techniques, because you can't change the diet of a person just like because you give an advice, someone will not start following. Okay, so you should be clear about the multidimensional care. Okay, that is important. Okay, that's what even in breathing pattern disorders also the role of diet was there. Okay, so remember that the faster the food is being mobilized, the easier it is for the diaphragm. Okay, to inhale that side. Okay, the air entry, because diaphragm has to descend. Okay, so lot of factors influence this. Okay, even substance abuse like alcoholism, liver hypertrophy, okay, hepatomegaly. Okay, lot of factors. Clear? So we start today's session without any further delay.